والورقة الثانية هي من تقديم الأستاذ هشام محمد هلال بعنوان Maritime Surveillance and Integral Part of Maritime Security، وهي عبارة عن ورقة مشتركة. الأستاذ هشام محمود هلال هو فيس دين ماريتيم بوست جراد ستاديز، هو نائب عميد وتقلد العديد من المناصب بالأكاديمية، أكاديمية العلوم الأمنية في جمهورية مصر العربية. من الخبرات التي تقلدها فايس بريزيدنت للمؤسسة International Institute of Navigation، فايس بريزيدنت Arab Institute of Navigation، وأيضا organizing several conferences and seminars، نظم الكثير من الملتقيات والمؤتمرات العلمية التي لها علاقة بالأمن البحري. يتفضل الأستاذ هشام هلال، وكما قلت هي ورقة مشتركة. عنوان الورقة المراقبة البحرية باعتبارها جزء لا يتجزأ من الأمن البحري. تفضل أستاذ.
شكرا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. بداية نتوجه بالشكر لمديرية الحرس الحدود ومعالي الفريق عواد على استضافته لنا، وانا بشرف ان دي تكون ثالث ورقه بحثيه اقدمها في سلسله الامن البحري او سلسله المؤتمرات والندوات اللي نظمتها مديريه حرس الحدود. فاتقدم بالشكر لكل اللجان المنظمه لهذه الندوه، ودعواتنا لكم بالتوفيق والنجاح والسداد دائما باذن الله تعالى. الورقه البحثيه حقيقه هي جزء من سلسله رسائل علميه تشرفت بالاشراف عليها للباحثين في الأكاديمية العربية للعلوم والتكنولوجيا والنقل البحري. دي الرسالة رقم 5، وهي لدارس الماجستير الليبي أسامة حسن، وهو كان المفترض هو اللي بيقدم هذه الورقة، لكن لظروف يعني ربنا يسهل الأمور في ليبيا، لظروف السياسية ما قدرش يوصل، فشرفت إن أنا أقدم هذه الورقة بالنيابة عنه، وإن شاء الله تنال إعجابكم بإذن الله تعالى. الورقة إن شاء الله تعالى بعنوان Maritime Surveillance an Integral Part of Maritime Security. خلال هذه الورقة هستعرض بداية Introduction. I'm sorry, I have to say it in English. So second will be the need for maritime surveillance users, legal framework, operational framework, structure framework, maritime surveillance and security, and finally conclusion to this paper. First of all, when we talk about the maritime surveillance, and as I told you earlier, it was a series of theses for postgraduate studies in the institute where I'm working as a vice dean of this institution. So we start from the piracy and finalize with this paper about the maritime surveillance. And the idea of this paper coming from the today complex and evolving maritime threats, which put a great premium on the knowledge and the understanding. So this paper will concentrate mainly on the knowledge and understanding of all parameters that can pose a threat to the security in the maritime domain. And of course, when we talk about the maritime surveillance, it was acknowledged that the key element usually when we talk about the threat, for any threat, even in maritime or even on land, so it will be the early detection. To achieve this end, there will be a need to a set of activities, the ultimate goal of which is probably identify maritime threats for appropriate action in an aerial stage. Again, as I told you, this paper will concentrate on the knowledge and the understanding, which is with no doubt is the present surveillance that provides a comprehensive maritime situation picture, which include details of activities, infrastructures, facilities, people, cargo, vessels, or any other means of transport. Factually, this is the core of the maritime surveillance system. This paper will include many definitions of the maritime surveillance, but for the presentation I choose only one definition, which I prefer always to use it when I talk about the maritime surveillance, which is the European Commission definition, where they said that maritime surveillance is the effective understanding of all activities carried out at sea that could impact the security, safety, economy, or environment of the European Union and its member states. I prefer this definition because it's very simply, if you exclude the European Union and its member states, you can include any other region all over the world, and then you got a definition which is valid for all zones or any country all over the world. Why we need the maritime surveillance? Of course, I'm not going to speak a lot about the UNCLOS because in the previous couple of days we heard a lot about the UNCLOS. But still, the UNCLOS said that 12 nautical miles to territorial seas were the norm and there was the requirement for extensive maritime patrolling. Of course, we all know the history of the territorial sea. It's beginning with 3 nautical miles, 6, 9, and then 12. And of course, the history of this, it was depending on the range of the guns. But now, of course, we can't depend on this parameter because the guns now can reach a very long distance. So we stop at 12 nautical miles. And of course, the jurisdiction, the national jurisdiction in this area is very simple to can patrol it or monitoring because it's just you can use the visually observation to monitor this area. But of course, when we talk about the EEZ, exclusive economic zone, we reach 200 nautical miles at where you can't control this or monitor this area or this huge area by just observing by visual manner, but you need the equipments, and as the professor said just before me that we recognize this in this exhibition today or this symposium, a lot of new technology in the monitoring of the coasts, and we can reach these 200 nautical miles very easy by the new technology. That's why we need the maritime surveillance. This is a small picture to show the zones, the enclosed zones from the territorial sea, 12 nautical miles, to the contingent zones, 24 EEZ, 200 nautical miles, and then above this it would be high seas. The problem to monitor this huge area to cover all the EEZ, it means that you need a lot of money. It's very expensive for developing countries and also for the developed countries to have patrols to cover all this area. So the costs of such patrols were and continue to be excessive. So even if you can monitor, if you have the costs to cover all this area, still there will be a gaps. And I think all of us remember the Philippine Islands, where they have patrols to monitor the whole area about Philippines in the 1980s and the 1990s, where the pirates was concentrated in this area. And even they have a lot of patrols, boats and other means of patrols, but still the piracy was a huge number at this time. That's why, because there is gaps between, at least between the consecutive patrols monitoring. To summing up, while UNCLOS presented an important starting point in the development of the need for the maritime surveillance, evolving threat to maritime security and the global political change have multiplied this need. Now, who are the maritime surveillance users? Very simply, when we talk about the users, they are the stakeholders, all of us. All the stakeholders in the maritime domain are a part of the maritime surveillance users, either to be public or private sectors. I like what Fields said, that there are 7 interests of the representatives of the sectors involved. As we can see, border control at sea, fisheries control, defense, general law enforcement, customs, maritime environment, maritime safety and security. And if we look to these 7 representatives, you find it's all connected to each other. So if you have some breach to the maritime environment, it will be affected the fisheries and so on. So it's a link, and all those stakeholders will be involved, and they are the users of the maritime surveillance. Again, if just to look to the legal framework, which I'm going to go very quick, the UNCLOS organizes a series of maritime zones, as we just said before. to create a framework of rights and obligations applicable of all states parties, including coastal and flag state. It's in the basis of the framework that coastal states drive their powers of enforcement of technical standards and rules over different maritime zones and by ships flying its flag. Based on this, the international legal framework regulating the rights and powers of coastal states to undertake maritime surveillance. So, if we start with the territorial sea and internal waters, as of course all of us know that it's the complete and absolute sovereignty that it enjoys over such waters. So, if in your territorial water and the inland waters, of course, it's complete and absolute sovereignty for the coastal states over these areas. Second, contingent zones within the, within its contingent zone, if was claimed a coastal state enjoy no particular additional surveillance powers, it's however entitled to undertake control measures for the purpose of preventing violations of customs, physical immigration, and so on. Third, which became very important now for all of us, which is the EEZ, which within its EEZ, a coastal state had the exclusive right to undertake surveillance in connection with activities relating to living and non-living resources and with regard to other activities, up to the continental shelf, of course. Finally, the high seas. In areas bound national jurisdiction, that high seas, all states have the implied right to undertake surveillance, but not to the extent to interfering with an exercise of the freedoms of the high seas by ships flying a foreign flag. This is the legal framework, which is, of course, all of us know about it. So, the operational framework for the maritime surveillance, it will be concentrated in some points, starting with the detection. Of course, to start the work of the maritime surveillance, we need to detect the object. So firstly, we have to establish its presence. And second, localization. We need to determine the position or the location of this object. And just to localize the location of the object, we need to classify and identify this object. Its type, class, whatever the identification for this object. Then we need to recognize this object matched with the pre-defined particular object and then target it. To recognize it, you have many methods to recognize this object, maybe by the port state control, tracking of the ship, whatever. So it's very simple to recognize it, and then we need to target it. And of course, the target before it can be effectively engaged. There is no need if it's already engaged in an operation, so we have in problem now, but we need to target it before he starts the operation. Could be doing nothing or boarding and searching, seizing or taking it to board according to the situation itself, and of course it will be working case by case. Important is the tracking of the detected object, just to be detected and localized it, and we need to track it all the time, maintaining the display or recording of its position. I just put a small description for the one method of the maritime surveillance, and we can start from any point. You can start from the fuser and tracker. Then you collect the data about it, multi-hypothesis, high precision, and then we go to the maritime data, fused and target tracker, then to the combatant multi-sensor tracks. Of course, all the maritime surveillance will depend mainly on the sensors and fusion. And then going to the alerts, and from the alerts you maybe have started to display the object to track it, or you can go to the GIS user interface, also again to the display unit, or we can start from the surveillance assets. You have to target this object. You may use whatever the equipment you are going to use, the aircraft, guns, whatever it is. And then also you can use these surveillance assets as sensors. You can put sensors to monitor the the area up to the EEZ. This is one system or structure framework for maritime surveillance to detect and to monitor and to target the object. All of this to reach the maritime surveillance and its relation with the security. If we talked about the maritime security, which already explained very well in the previous presentation, the maritime security refers to all relevant activities that support the early identification, mitigation, management of and recovery from intentional unlawful acts and hazardous incidents, creating the stability and good order of the maritime domain, thereby limiting or preventing access to freedom of action within and use of the maritime domain. Thus, it can be understood as a comprehensive process leading to a desired outcome. This process-based definition makes the role of maritime surveillance crystal clear, and as a conclusion, it becomes more than obvious that maritime surveillance is a prerequisite and an integral part of the maritime security. To conclude this paper, maritime surveillance is of the interest and the responsibility of all users of the maritime domain, all but those involving in unlawful activities that affect maritime safety, threaten security, and endanger environment. Knowledge and understanding are the twin imperatives of an effective maritime surveillance process. Knowledge is about information availability of the situation in the maritime domain, while understanding is the capability to timely process that information. Maritime surveillance is with no doubt an integral part of maritime security and should be regarded as a fundamental process that adds value, first, to effectively conduct the maritime security operations, second, to increase effectiveness in the planning and complement information that support policy and decision makers. Thank you very much.